Hello, I'm Extracat, and 10 years ago today, Minecraft revealed dual-wielding, spectral arrows, and an extension of the End Dimension in a huge combat and End update. A decade down the line, the community clamours for another combat overhaul and an End extension, yet somehow this defining, divisive update from pre-modern Minecraft has drifted from our memories, and so for the 10-year anniversary, I want to dive deep into the snapshot that started it all. This is Snapshot 15W31A, which for those unfamiliar, is the first snapshot to release in the 31st week of 2015, but also the first snapshot to release in almost a year, and it was huge as a result, huge in terms of content and anticipation, but it also represented the closing of what was a very dark phase for Mojang, as 2015 and 2025 are the only years in the history of the company to have not had a major update released for the game. And unlike 2025, where there are drops to replace the content, the closest they got in 2015 was an April Fool's joke, which was actually how this was ever revealed to begin with. The 2015 April Fool's was the Loves and Hugs update, and it was very fun by itself, having the infamous pink wither, but it also had a QR code that revealed they were working on 1.9, the combat update, and so this is very notable because it meant that people had something to look forward to, but they weren't necessarily what until it all came at once. And before we go into exactly what was inside the snapshot, I want to share people's reactions to the combat update first, because this was an amazing thing for me to dive into, almost like a time capsule, to look at the Reddit thread from the time of people discussing this brand new thing. You could see that people were largely positive, saying things like praise Dinnerbone or our nightmare is over, but also you see comments that are just mind blown by the fact that the End Dimension as we know it now effectively came in the snapshot, saying things like, OMG, I found a ship, and can you imagine being the first person outside of Mojang to discover something so huge and bizarre? Indeed, I think that would have blown my mind personally, but even more interesting is the YouTube side of things. There were far more snapshot videos being made back then by far more creators, and so that means that I can reference a mumbo jumbo video where, to really drive home just how revolutionary the idea of having the End gateways and the End islands was, I want to show you his first time going through one.
If we ender pearl through into this little portal here, it takes us through into the new dimension. This is the End with loads of fancy other bits and pieces. You can see we have some crazy plants over here, and also we have ourselves some End dungeons.
So super fun that he calls it an entirely new dimension there, but also referring to the new End cities as an End dungeon. This is actually something that Jeb has done too, and it's an easy part of the hard thing about making snapshots video, that like, yeah, you don't know what something will be named after the fact, and the End city is obviously the name that was eventually stuck with. Meanwhile, you can look at different creators like Pyro Puncher, who was more enamored by the arrows.
Any second now, don't fall into the water horse. Okay, so if I hit the horse with this, he hits me obviously. But, oh, that's like Tony Hawk, bigger.
I didn't have anything to add to that clip. I just thought it was funny how different these same snapshot videos could be, but in general the mood was wildly positive, and what's interesting is just how many major YouTubers actually covered it. If we look from just my YouTube search here, you can see that major Minecraft YouTubers from the time, Mumbo Jumbo, Captain Sparkles, Zazuma Void, Slice Slime, Doc M, Seth Bling, as well as Cubberfan, Chimney Swift, Pyro Puncher, and Acidic Blitz. In other words, a huge number of people covering it, with all a large number of views each. While if we look at a big snapshot from this year, 25W02A, you can see that just 4 separate channels were making videos on exactly the same thing, and indeed, substantially fewer views all round, besides maybe Zazuma Void there. I think this is hugely interesting personally, and it shows that there is far less appetite for snapshots and new update content now than there was back then, or if even that is too much of a reach, we could at least say there was a huge interest in at least this one snapshot from the community back then, perhaps because of the huge dark age that came before it, and so there was this huge excitement for it that didn't exist for the current snapshot. If you're curious, by the way, as to why I didn't include myself in either of those comparisons, I did make 1.9 videos, including at the time. You can see here that YouTube has done a great job at understanding me saying my own name, and I did make a video on 25W02A, but the Bedrock beta equivalent, apparently just after I was flying home, according to the description. But what's really fun is the fact that I didn't ever make a video on Snapshot 15W31A, and so given it's the 10-year anniversary, why don't I do that now? And so welcome back to my snapshot review. I decided to go much more low budget mumbo jumbo than Pyro Puncher on this one, so no complaints about horses from me, but instead a showcase of everything that came in this snapshot, and it was the first one for the combat drop, or rather the combat update, as I guess they were calling them back then. Imagine calling them that, so crazy. But yeah, what's interesting about it is the fact that they did make quite a few non-combat, non-end changes. So this was one of the first ones. They made it so if you place a single iron bar or single glass pane, instead of being just a part of this, previously you would have got like half of this texture, instead you get just the 2x2 little texture, which is fun for parkour and jumping on, I guess. They also brought in brand new beetroot. You can grow it with beetroot seeds, you get the beetroot crop, put 6 of those together and you get beetroot soup. They also brought in tipped arrows, which I would argue is combat related, but we'll leave that to the side for now and say, look, they have tipped arrows. And by the way, all potions were messed up for some reason at this point in time. Every potion looks exactly the same, I don't know why. Also, I moved a newer world into this old version of Minecraft, and everything works exactly fine, besides my raw chicken, which I have 0 of. I've never seen the idea of having 0 of an item, but I'll hold things up. As I say, then we have the things which are end-related and which never came to Bedrock, because we've got the spectral arrow here, of course. This is a very, very big deal. Here is a zombie, here is me shooting it with a spectral arrow, and now you can see that I can see it even through walls and even through other blocks. This is a crazy change that you might not notice if you're a Bedrock player. You might think, wait, when did that come to Bedrock? And we'll come into that later, of course. And then, of course, the other big change that came in this snapshot was dual wielding. This meant that you could hold 2 weapons at the same time. I used to think this would be crazy, like an axe and a sword, but obviously, when it actually came out, what it meant is anything that has a right-click functionality can go in your offhand. Oh, the sword still let you block at this point, so you can't use the sword and use the torch, but instead you have to use a shield and the torch, which is something very notable. So yeah, I don't want to give away too much of that sword torch segment right there, so instead let's now talk about all the new blocks they added, because most of what was actually in this new drop, in this new snapshot, was actually not found right here, but instead if we go to the end, oh, it doesn't make a big sound! Oh, that's crazy. Instead of we go to the end and we go to creative mode, you'll see how this works. So one of the big changes was ender pearls now work in creative. Can you believe that? They did not work in creative till this point. I think that's crazy. And then also, it's a brand new end dimension that, you know, like a classic one, we spawn in the end here. So this was something that was new to Java players at the time, the idea of having an end which had pillars actually around the circle. If you've ever looked at the end fight before this point, it's actually kind of jarring, like the towers just all over the end for no good reason. It's actually really, really strange if you ask me, but after this point, they were in a big circle, and even crazier, they added these 2 with the little towers. Now, what's really fun about this is you might not realize this is a feature they actually took from the console edition developers, because while Java had been ahead of both console and Pocket Edition for a very long time, this was the update where they sort of admitted they needed to catch up in quite a few ways. And one of those ways, if we can, you know, let's just teleport myself out there. So if I teleport myself out to 1,000, 100, 1,000, I should find, although I don't find anything. Hey, I should find. Here is all the rest of the update. This did not exist before. I cannot stress enough to you that if you were in the end, you were in the end. That was all of it. But after this update, you could go out to the Outer End Islands, as they were known, what represents the vast majority of the End Dimension, and you could not just find chorus plants, and the fact that, you know, like, the fact that these existed was very otherworldly, but also they represent the only food source in the entirety of this dimension. It was still more food than the Nether realistically had at this point, but, you know, like, still, it's kind of a wild thing to think about, but even crazier than that is what you can find after a bit of flying around. I can't stress to you enough just how much I'm winging this. It's 1.9 Minecraft. I don't even know how you would find an end city, because there's no locate command. And even if there, like, you know, if we type that in, it's going to be like, what the heck is a /locate? But yeah, we're going to find ourselves an end city, presumably. Actually, wait, here's the faster way to do it, right? We'll just throw a bunch of these. By the way, ender pearls look tiny, right? This isn't just me being crazy. But ender pearls actively look ridiculous. Is it just me? Like, it feels like something's gone wrong, even. Similarly, I have 28 chunks of render distance, but I can't see anything. Like, look, I can see an end city. So, yeah, the end city was an absolutely wild thing, or the end dungeon, whatever you want to call it. This brand new structure was kind of nuts, because, again, it represents the only real content in this new area, but at the time, which, by the way, I want to point out, this area was added today, and the first piece of content it got was the end city, with its end ships. This entire area has no updates in terms of biomes, it has no updates in terms of structures. We are playing a fully released version from 2025 as far as we're concerned of the content in the end, besides a few tweaks and besides the shulker boxes being added. Isn't that actually kind of ridiculous? I'm assuming also there's no Elytra. I might be wrong about that, though, if I'm being honest. Oh, yeah, I am. Okay, there isn't one. There's a beacon in here, though. What are you doing in there? So yeah, this is a very, very different imagining of the end city, and since I know it's what you really want, I'm gonna go and fight it in survival. So here's the fun thing about it. This is the first snapshot for the combat update, right? And as you can see, I'm here using my offhand ability, where I can then place torches on walls if I want to, but you'll notice something very weird. Despite having fully functional shulkers, fully functioning end cities, fully functioning end dimensions, spectral arrows, tipped arrows, etc., this update is missing one big feature. What does this update not have? It has the combat update, at least in theory to some extent, but what it is missing is the combat cooldown. There is no little bar below my cross that tells me I'm not ready to hit yet, I'm going to hit really weak. There is no sweeping edge, and crucially, there is no buff for the axe to compensate for its now lower attack damage. Everything that exists in terms of combat damage and the actual combat system is exactly the same as it is in current day Bedrock and I guess in previous Java editions. And so this is something that I think is hugely interesting, because this snapshot represents a decent majority of content in the update that people look back on fondly. Seriously, I think that if you try to find someone who doesn't like the end cities and the end islands, they're going to dislike it because they want more, not because they want less or because they think what exists is terrible, right? If you try to find someone who hates offhand, they're going to dislike it because they're a Minecraft boomer who wants it to be the way it was in 2011 or something. But genuinely, there has been so much hate for the second half of this update that I think that it kind of clouds people's judgment on this half. Which is why now, we're going to move over. Oh, man. Every time I play Java and I look at my own face, I'm like, what? This isn't normal, right? Something's gone wrong. But speaking of things that have gone wrong, this update never made it in its entirety to Bedrock, and I think it's worth seriously looking at the rigmarole and the craziness that happened as to why that isn't the case, and then actually analysing the snapshot we've just seen to maybe work things out better. Because the actual string of events that happened was that after this very popular snapshot came out, there were a series of slightly less popular ones, including taking away the shield's blocking functionality that I found so weird and putting it into the shield, and indeed also having that combat delay that is, to this day, the defining feature of 1.9 to many players, especially those who work on servers where they still emulate 1.8 versions and 1.8 combat, but there is still to this day a large number of people that do not like how the second half of the combat update snapshots went, and indeed, as a result of that, when they were looking at Java updates they needed to port over to Bedrock, they put this in very low priority. That's why when I showed you a trailer of all of these features, it was made for the Bedrock version of the game, but they specifically excluded the combat side of things, and this was Jeb's master plan to not implement the combat update into Bedrock until they had remastered it on Java. And so after its release in 2016, a series of tests were started in 2019 where Jeb intended to get combat right, not just for Java, but for Bedrock as well. And so the plan was to do a series of snapshots, which they started in 2019, but to do this outside of the main game. That's because they were testing these snapshots for the Never update, but they were always prepared to release it earlier than or later than the Never update so that they could get combat right and not have the time pressure of their once-a-year updates. This was a genius idea, and so we saw 9 separate snapshots, the latest of which is Combat Test 8C, which launched in August 26 of 2020, and you might notice that was actually 5 years ago. What has happened since then? Well, our official explanation is that Jeb says he is now working on the PvE side of this update, but crucially, we haven't seen any progress, no updates, no snapshots, not even a statement as to what exactly is going on. We just know that there is going to be, at some point in time, there is going to be a Phase 2 and it's going to release, but right now it's been 5 years since we've heard anything from anyone at Mojang, so has the project been cancelled or is it just a 6-year plan? We genuinely don't have any clue, but what we can see is how Mojang is doing the rest of the game. Again, 1.9 really fractured not just the community, but arguably a lot of Mojang developers got a lot of hate for this, and the community was never quite the same after, and so repeating the combat update is something Mojang have been very, very cautious about ever since, and I think that that caution even tells us about why they've shifted to drops that they do now. Indeed, think about the first snapshot that I just showed you, 15W31A. It was almost a year from there till the actual release of the end update, and ultimately in that time people forgot about how great the end islands were and tipped arrows and all of the new potions and stuff, and instead people got focused on the changes they started adding to things like combat and, you know, the addition and removal of the quiver, and indeed the shields, removing that little sword block that people loved. People got so focused on those extra changes that 1.9 isn't even always remembered as the Elytra update, as the update that added the end islands and all of the features I showed you today, the chorus fruits, the shulkers. There was so much that was incredible that was added in this update that if it had released as an end update in its own little phase, people would have looked back very fondly. But the longest development cycle a Minecraft update has had is also the most hated, and this pattern of features being added early in a snapshot cycle and then being almost forgotten about on the end update is something we see in modern update times too. The Warden was an incredible thing when it first released. To be fair, it had been announced over a year prior, but the Warden absolutely blew people's minds, and then by the time 1.19 came around, people were bored of it already. They'd already seen people killing the Warden for months at that point, and this is a kind of truth in the community that there is only so long that something can be in development for before it feels like it's done and seen, before it's even available. This is what the drop system aims to learn from, and it's one of the reasons why a combat update has been taking so long. Nowadays, when Minecraft has a set of features people like say the copper golem or copper tools, they release them and then they say, yeah, this starts roughly a 3-month timer and then it will be in your hands in the base game, and people have been loving it. Whether it is good or bad for the total amount of content in the game, highly debatable, but in terms of the average person's perception of Minecraft, now it gets 4 updates a year, and those updates contain awesome, well-loved features, whether we're talking about shelves in the future, or whether we're talking about right now with the happy ghast and vibrant visuals, or whether we're talking about brand new biomes and bundles and hardcore. People are loving the new way that Minecraft are doing content, but it does represent a huge flaw for bigger updates like the combat update or the minecart one. That's because the combat update needs to be developed over a long period of time, and that long period of time ideally needs to have some community feedback, and so what are they going to do about it? I see 2 pathways forwards here. One is that they simply say, yeah, you can't develop the combat update in a 1-drop cycle, therefore we're not going to do it. Or, what I could see them doing is saying what parts of the combat update are broadly popular, what parts of the combat update need minor improvements, like how the Happy Ghast needed improvements, or like how mob variants for cold and hot biomes needed minor improvements. What parts of the update are like that, and what parts of the update need so much community engagement that honestly it's not going to work. I think that if they think about that, they'll come to the conclusion that offhand is the logical thing to add all by itself, and then you can deal with the rest of the changes later. This is something that I am starting to, for a long time I would have speculated this and then said, but good luck, we're working on the time scale of Mojang Internal Studios, but we got a little light at the end of the tunnel recently because a recent Minecraft beta has shown that there are components working to do with the offhand. These are for creators right now, people making add-ons and maps, but the fact that they are working on it is a sign, often in many cases, that they are about to bring that support in some form to the game, and so is the offhand finally coming to the Bedrock? Is a broader combat update finally coming? I don't know which of those 2 things it is, but what I am excited for is the idea that one day, the things that Java players had on this day 10 years ago are available on Bedrock, and I know that it's not popular at Mojang, but I think it's crucial that if they want to talk about parity, and they want to enforce all of these Java features onto Bedrock that we don't even want, like the terrible grass and the lack of savanna colors and the lack of horses and boats, then it's time that they give us the actually most important feature, the one that every Bedrock player would love to take advantage of, in the form of offhand or dual wielding. That is what I want. That is what, let's be honest, all of us want. And if you have enjoyed this video and you like following Bedrock related videos and news, make sure to subscribe to the channel to see more of these, because for now I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Look, we're a modern channel. Look at this outro here.